Greetings, citizens! You're now trapped in a nerd cage with your hosts Mark and Jay. We hope you have a smashing good time.
Hello and welcome. That's right, you're trapped in NerdCage Live. This ain't just a reaction show, but a debate show and a live discussion on everything that makes people like you and I tick. So thank you for joining us tonight. Happy Halloween, and please hit that like button and subscribe. I'm your co-host Jay St. G, coming to you live from Syracuse, New York, and always with me, the warrior from Wakanda, the fiend from Louisville, Mark Withers. What's shaking, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? Super excited to be here as usual. And Jay is showing us a Funko Pop Norman Bates, which looks awesome. And so the reason why he's doing that is because tonight's episode is going to be a look back at the 60th anniversary of the classic horror film by Alfred Hitchcock. And yes, I'm talking about Psycho. Now, this movie has influenced everything that came after it, but it almost didn't get made. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, I wanted to see, after a rewatch, Jay, what are your thoughts on the movie?
You know what? I like this movie more as an adult than I did when I was a kid.
Right.
Because I understand cinematography now. I understand budget. I understand movies in general better than I did as a kid. So there's more to appreciate. The cinematography right off the hand, the camera movement is so ahead of its time, and that score, and like everything that's been said already. But yeah, I feel like even the beauty of this movie, even if you know the ending, it's still worth a rewatch because you can watch it knowing the ending, the truth about Norman Bates, and if you've never seen it before, you're still in for a twist. And at the end of the day, like, I feel like this movie's aged well, and on top of that, this was a Universal film. Universal brought us Frankenstein, the creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, Wolfman. To me, Norman Bates is the other Universal monster that I feel like that should be lumped into that category.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because the executives at Universal didn't even want to make this. The story, for anybody who doesn't know, it's based off of a book written by Robert Bloch, who based the Norman Bates character loosely off of the serial killer Ed Gein.
Yep.
So it was sort of the book itself was sort of a critical success. People were talking about it, and Universal kind of got wind of it, but they were not interested in making it as a film because they felt like it was a little bit too much for audiences. So that said, around the same time, Alfred Hitchcock was really looking for something shocking because he had tried to option another movie, another story called Diabolique, which, the licensing actually was bought by another studio, and they turned that into a film maybe like a year or two prior, and it turned out to be this highly influential film. He wanted to make something along those same lines, and so his assistant brought him the Psycho story, and he was interested in that, and so he purchased the rights to that for about $9,500, and in addition to that, he purchased all of the outstanding books that, all the novels that were for sale. He didn't want it to be available to anybody because he was like, I don't want anybody to know what the twist is. I don't want really anybody to know what the story is. When he brought his pitch to Universal, they initially said, no way, we're not going to make this movie because he had...
Can you blame them though?
Right, exactly. You know what I mean? Like they were expecting, at the time he was trying to, he had been slated to do this other movie called No Bail for the Judge. And the actress in that, Audrey Hepburn, she got pregnant at the time, and then she couldn't do the film, and some other things happened. And so the development for that movie fell apart, and Universal wasn't very happy with him. And so Hitchcock pitched this to them, They said, no way, we're not interested in it. We've already decided that we're not going to touch this story. He pitched to them that, okay, well, I'll take a reduced fee in order to do this. They still said no. So then he was like, well, fine. What I'll do is I'll use my own money and I'll keep the budget under $1 million, and I'll use my crew from my TV show. He had a show called Alfred Hitchcock Presents at the time. Yep. So he did all of those things. And then in exchange for that, he negotiated a deal with them for like a 6% stake in the profits. So with that, they agreed to get the movie on track. And that's kind of how we got that film.
Wow. So Mark, to add on top of everything you just said, you need to watch the movie Hitchcock with Anthony Hopkins, who plays Alfred Hitchcock during the making of the movie Psycho. It's really, really well done. Scarlett Johansson is in there as Janet Leigh, and the movie's just so well done. It explains everything that went on behind the scenes. They really show the behind the scenes of the whole shower scene and all the stress that Alfred Hitchcock went through during the making of this film. Really took a toll on him and his wife and his relationship with his wife. Like, it's a really, really fascinating watch. If you're a fan of Psycho, this is a much watch. If you're a fan of horror, you should watch this, or Hitchcock. Or if you just like Anthony Hopkins, it's a really great performance by him. We couldn't talk about Psycho without talking about 2012's Hitchcock. So if you want to know more about behind the scenes and the making of the movie and what led to this movie, watch the movie Hitchcock from 2012.
Awesome. I definitely am intrigued by what you just said. So I didn't even know that that movie existed. And I'm a huge fan of all the actors that you mentioned. And so I am going to probably try to get that one in this week and take a look at it. That said, I mean, can we talk about the music for a minute? I feel like that movie would not be what it is without that score. I mean, just the opening credits kind of give you the vibe of like what this movie is going to be about, and it's so tense. I think that Bernard Herrmann was the right pick for this score. I know originally like Hitchcock wanted like a bigger like orchestration. He wanted like a more of a jazz feel, from what I understand. But because the budget was so constrained, and because Herrmann wasn't willing to take a reduced fee, what they could afford was a 4-piece violin, like a quartet, basically. And so they used that as effectively as possible, and the result was incredible, in my opinion. I mean, you don't have that that effect with the shower scene without that, you know what I mean? Which is like
it's like Jaws. Think of Jaws.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah. So, you know, I wanted to get your thoughts on that too. Like, what do you think of that?
Well, here's the thing. Like, I heard the Psycho theme before I even saw the movie Psycho. It's had a huge impact on pop culture. So many TV shows have parodied it, and in fact, there's been like bands have used it. Like, for example, like Body Count used it in the second album that they did. I forgot what song, but they used it as an intro to one of their songs. I'm just like, yeah. So that's how big that simple piece of music is. It's spanned across all platforms of pop culture, whether it's TV, music, movies, and everything else. And it's just so iconic, and it's just so eerie and tense. Right.
Also worth noting that Busta Rhymes used the main theme as a hook for one of his songs, "Gimme Some More," which was like one of my favorite Busta Rhymes songs for a long time before I actually like saw Psycho. Like I'd heard that riff, I'd heard that break before. And then when I finally got to see the movie, I was like, oh, that's where that's from. You know what I mean? Like, and it just like made me love the song even more. So, I mean, that's how pervasive this score is. And I think that it's easily Herrmann's best work. One of the most recognizable pieces of music in movie history. And, you know, it's undeniable. I mean, I think it really makes, in a lot of ways, it makes the movie.
Absolutely. And can we also just say that this movie, as far as I'm concerned, this was the movie that gave birth to the slasher genre of horror movies. Because before Psycho, I mean, when we think, I know people talk about Halloween, Friday the 13th, even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but you know what? Psycho predates all those movies. And I know that Alfred Hitchcock was going for a suspenseful movie, but this is really the birth of slasher horror. It really is.
I agree. And Herschel Gordon Lewis, he kind of said as much. Like a few years later, he came out with Blood Feast, which is considered by a lot of people to be the first slasher film or the first splatter film. And that was, it sort of like caused this domino effect where, that movie then influenced Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Mm-hmm. That influenced Friday the 13th. And all of these things, basically all roads lead back to Psycho. Exactly. Even Halloween, the first Halloween movie has a bunch of Psycho references. The psychiatrist the psychiatrist in Halloween, his name is Dr. Loomis. Well, one of the main characters in Psycho is Sam Loomis. And you find out through the backstory of Halloween that Dr. Loomis, his first name is also Sam. So it was a tribute to that film. Also worth noting that Janet Leigh is the mother of Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays Laurie Strode.
Oh wow, I forgot.
Yeah.
I completely forgot. My good wow. So funny we all come full circle. I completely forgot about that. Wow. Damn. But yeah, you're right. This movie gave birth to like so many, like I said, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the dead bodies, the way they use them, I should say. And of course, Friday the 13th, Kill for Mother. I mean,
right.
Where we got that from. And of course, in Halloween, there are shots of Mike Myers holding the knife, and it's the same motion that you see, Norman Bates use the knife and everything. So yeah, without, basically without Psycho, we don't have the horror movies that we have today.
Right. And, the actual, the murder scenes in that film are relatively tame by today's standards. But back in 1960, that was considered so repulsive that critics like almost universally panned it. In fact, one critic was so grossed out by it that she left the theater early before it ended and then resigned her post as a critic because she was just like, I don't want to be subjected to movies like this ever again. So I mean, it's interesting that was the movie that kind of broke that barrier as far as stepping up the level of violence in film, and that was sort of the origin of gore in horror films.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there was a scene at the very end of that Hitchcock movie where Alfred Hitchcock is standing by himself at the premiere of the movie, and he's just relishing. He's just waiting for the people, the theater's reaction to the shower scene.
Right.
And he's up, he's just going through the motions, and he's like getting all excited, and then he heard the shock of the people in the theater, and he's laughing like, I got them. That's what I wanted. That was what he was going for.
Right.
He was going for that. Speaking of, in the original movie, I think, if I'm not mistaken, after rewatching it, Hitchcock had a brief cameo at the very beginning of the movie. He was standing outside the. Yep. It's okay.
Standing outside of Janet Leigh's work. Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't catch that the first time I watched it, but then the other day I was watching. I was like, "Is that Alfred Hitchcock?" And then I looked it up and I saw that that was him. And the reason why he picked that scene to do his cameo is that he wanted to be. It gave him an opportunity to be close to his daughter, who was, I guess, in that scene. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, "Oh, this will give me the chance to spend the day with my daughter if I just do this little extra bit here."
That's a nice little story. So yeah, I mean, what's out there is out there about Psycho. I mean, like I said, to me, upon a rewatch of this movie's age, I feel like I appreciate it more now as an adult as I did as a kid, and I feel like it's definitely worth a rewatch. And I had a good time rewatching, and we couldn't finish this look back without mentioning the sequels that followed, the remake that followed, right. and of course we already mentioned the Hitchcock movie, but also the Bates Motel TV series.
Right.
So the sequels. All right, listen, I am not here to bash the sequels. I mean, you can't surpass the first one, but the sequels are certainly interesting. They're definitely worth watching if you can find them. That's the thing. The sequels are really, really hard to find. Like, I can't think of any streaming service. I can't even think of it. Like, I don't know if there's a Blu-ray or DVD set of these movies. I really don't. And I actually watched them. I rewatched them like maybe a decade ago online. Like, I binged all the sequels like back to back because I was curious. Because at the time, the only movies I've seen was the first one and that crap remake with Vince Vaughn, which is, again, it's crap. If you're gonna remake a movie, like, at least try to make it different, try to make it better. They tried so hard. They were trying to like recapture every scene. And then there was just a ridiculous masturbation scene, and like, it was just so dumb. And then to me, Vince Vaughn it just doesn't work. I'm not bashing Vince Vaughn out, but he's no Norman Bates. It just didn't work. I'll never watch it.
Yeah, they from what I understand, what Gus Van Sant was trying to achieve with that, he was experimenting and seeing, okay, well, what will happen if I do like a shot by shot remake and I don't make any changes? And it failed, I think, in part because, you know, times change, people's tastes change, our tolerance for violence kind of changes. Like, all of those things, you know, kind of play into why the original works and why this shot by shot remake didn't. You know, it's like, you know, like you said, if you're going to redo it, kind of modernize it and make it, you know, give it that level, that extra level of verisimilitude that it needs. But they, you know, in large part, they used like the same screenplay with the exact same lines. And those lines don't really work in like the modern era, in the same way that they did in 1960.
Yeah.
So it just kind of like flopped. It didn't do what it was supposed to do, which is unfortunate. It's, you know, Gus Van Sant is actually a good director, and it would have behooved him to kind of just put his own spin on it and sort of modernize it. Yeah,
it was just epic failure altogether. Now, like I said, the other canon sequels are interesting though. So Psycho 2 came out in 1981 or 82, I can't remember. It was either 81 or 82, and it takes place, you know, in 1981. Right. And basically in this one, Norman Bates has served his time in the mental institution, and they said that he's cured of, you know, from his mental disease, and that they want to integrate him slowly back into society, and, you know, he has to find a job and this and that. Well, lo and behold, spoiler alert, that his mental illness comes back to haunt him, and he starts, you know, going into mother mode. You know, Again, like, there's stuff that in there that like triggers him to do it, and, you know, again, it just shows that, you know, he shouldn't have been let out.
Right.
It's not a bad sequel. It's nowhere near as good as the first one, but it's definitely not a bad sequel at all. It's actually a good sequel. It's worth watching. Now, Psycho 3, again, I'm going off sheer memory because it's been over a decade. Now, Psycho 3 is kind of a continuation of Psycho 2, but this time Norman Bates falls in love with a woman, and just as he was about to kill her, she like slips in the shower and she hits her. I don't remember specifically, but she hits her head and she thinks she sees the Virgin Mary, but it's really Norman dressed up as his mother. Right. But he doesn't end up finishing the job, and then like she thinks that she's being, you know, that the Virgin Mary or an angel's coming to save her and this and that. He does not end up killing her, but he ends up falling in love with her. And again, he's trying to have this relationship with her, but he's, you know, fighting his mental illness, and again, has his sporadic mother moments. And they go, and again, the what makes the two sequels kind of fascinating there is they dig a little bit deeper, you know, with the whole mother thing, and, you know, you hear the mother's voice talk to him and say things that you didn't hear in the first movie and stuff. So it adds a little bit more development there, which is pretty cool. Now, Psycho 4. Now this one's a little off-putting. So this one, it was a made-for-TV movie that came out in 1991, and this serves as a sequel to the third one, but it was also a prequel. Basically, what the whole premise is Norman Bates is home, and he's calling a radio station, and he's sharing the story about what happened to him as a kid with his mother. So it's actually a prequel. It's actually about Norman and his mother when she was still alive. And then the actress that plays his mother is actually the same actress that played Juliet in the Romeo and Juliet movie from the 60s. So yeah, he's just telling the story about him and his mother, and that he starts getting the urge to kill again, and there's kind of like a somewhat happy ending to it. It's not really that good, but it's definitely worth watching. And it's really interesting though, because I feel like that was the movie that kind of like launched the idea for what we got in Bates Motel,
which was a great show. I loved that show a lot. I mean, I thought that Freddie Highmore was a great like young version of Norman Bates. He has just enough creepiness, but at the same time, just enough likability to sort of make him the protagonist in that. And I've always been a fan of Vera Farmiga. I think she did a really good job of playing his mom. And I mean, very few flaws in that show. I really wish I had watched that final season. I missed out on it, but I know that you watched it to the end. What did you think of that last season?
Well, the only problem with the last season is the way it ends ultimately doesn't lead up to what we know as Psycho. I'll leave it at that.
Right.
But the series as a whole was pretty solid, and if you can take the way like, well, hey, this ending doesn't make sense if you're going to lead up to Psycho the character, but if you watch it and just take it like this is just a whole separate universe, and that it's like a whole different take on Norman Bates, then it does end the way you kind of would want it to, I guess, because the characters that ultimately survive are the ones that you were kind of rooting for. So hope I'm not giving too much spoilers away for those who haven't seen it, but yeah, it was overall, it was a solid series. It really was. In fact, I would probably take Bates Motel over Psycho 4 for sure, even though Bates Motel was clearly influenced by Psycho 4 right down to a T.
Interesting. I don't really remember any of the sequels. Like I vaguely remember Psycho 2. I remember the trailer.
It's definitely worth rewatch if you can. Like I said, if you can find them. Like I said, anyone in the comments can please let us know where you can find these movies readily available, because I really feel like this. I think the Psycho franchise deserves like a 4-pack of Blu-rays that has all the movies, because I really. Again, the sequels by no means are better, don't even come close to the first one, but they're definitely worth watching, especially this. Among the sequels, the second one's probably the best one between 2, 3, and 4. 2 is easily the best one. 3 was a little off-putting, but was interesting, and it had a pretty damn good ending. And then Psycho 4 was weird because it's a sequel and a prequel. And you could clearly tell it was made for TV. So, but they're worth watching if you can find them.
Interesting. So before we wrap this up, I mean, my closing thoughts on this film are that, it's easily one of the most influential movies of the last century. Certainly still has, carries a lot of weight today. For people who are really fans of noir cinema, of suspense, of thrillers and horror and things like that. So influential. And, it's definitely worth a watch if you have not seen it. And it's definitely worth a rewatch if you have. So what are your thoughts on it?
Psycho is a I can't even talk today. Psycho is a phenomenal piece of horror history. It really is, and easily Hitchcock's. I mean, it's debatable, but I feel like this is Alfred Hitchcock's best movie, and I feel like this is the movie that aged the best. And like I said, without Psycho, no Halloween, no Friday the 13th, no Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, this movie really, the influence is still felt in horror today. And yeah, I just feel like it's aged pretty good, and it's a top-notch film. It really is. I can't knock on the film at all. I really can't. Sometimes when you do these rewatches, okay, you're gonna see stuff that you didn't pick up on the first time, like, oh, that doesn't really work. Well, to me, Psycho still works.
Right. And the fact that we're still talking about it 60 years later says it all. It basically speaks volumes to, how good that movie is and what a master of horror Hitchcock was.
Absolutely. So, yeah, thoughts on everyone in the comments, man. Thoughts on Psycho, and have you seen the sequels? What are your thoughts on the sequels? What are your thoughts on the remake? And of course, highly recommend rewatch Psycho and definitely watch the movie Hitchcock. It's a fascinating watch. So, we're wishing everybody out there a happy Halloween at this time of the recording. We are very excited for our upcoming show with a live stream with Zach Householder of Whitechapel. So, we could definitely talk about horror movies there and nerd culture and music. So we're really, really looking forward. I hope everyone can make it there. And if you happen to listen to this after the stream, go back and watch the stream for sure.
Yes. So like I said in a past episode, I really think this coming Thursday is going to be an episode for the ages. It's we've got Zach from Whitechapel, who's a really good friend of mine. He's also very much into nerd culture and all the cool things that we're into. It's going to be sort of our live sort of Halloween special, if you would, for lack of a better term. So it's going to be a good time. So if you miss it, it'll still be up on YouTube. It'll be worth a watch if you get a chance.
Yeah. So that being said, before we go, we ask you to pretty please like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, spread this shit like syphilis, and happy Halloween to everyone. It was definitely, we had to pick Psycho as our pick for our Halloween look back, and we hope you really enjoyed. So USA, from Louisville to Syracuse, to all of our friends and fans of the world at NerdCage Live, enjoy life, stay safe, and again, happy Halloween and good night.
Sayonara.
Ooh, trying to get out of the nerd cage, are ya? Well, before you go, hit that subscribe button. And if you're really intrigued, ring that bell. Thank you for dropping by. Until next time, tell everyone you know about NerdCage Live!